I woke up this morning and then I saw that I'm giving a talk called Art World versus Zine World, which is a title you made up.
Yes, I did make it up.
Then I thought I'd improvise based on this title, which I just learned this morning. So I'm a self-hating artist. I'm an artist by profession. People say, what do you do as a job? That is actually what I do. And I'm from the London art world, so I'm from the most pretentious, elitist bubble community called the London art world. I like coming to Bradford. I've been to every single Bradford Zine fair, apart from last year because I live in the Netherlands. So I don't know if this is a southern cliche, but Bradford's people are less pretentious than people in London. Right? I think that's true, right? And they're more kind-hearted and yeah, basically. And that's the north generally. That's not a London cliche.
We'll accept that generalisation, shall we?
So I've just come back from a festival called Documenta. Has anyone heard of Documenta? The Documenta's Germans like to think it's the most important thing in the world. It's an exhibition that takes place every 5 years in Germany. The two biggest contemporary art events are Venice Biennale, which is like the Olympics of contemporary art, and then you have Documenta, which takes place every 5 years, but is more interesting. And this has all these buzzwords that are trendy these days, decoloniality, intersectionality, participation.
We've come across disruption a lot recently.
Oh, I wish this was more disruptive. And you go to Documenta and there's these spaces called African Cluster or Algerian Women's Archive or Aboriginal Tent, and you'll go the actual city of Kassel where this takes place since 1955. It's very visibly Muslim. There's people who look like our uncles, aunties. The one good thing Angela Merkel did is she let in all these refugees, and there's a backlash against that in Germany. So you get Afghans, Somalis, Kurdish, blah blah, and then you go into this place called African Cluster, and you look around, and you turn around, 100% Mayo space, right? and the thing you'll notice about contemporary art, which is the pretentious world I belong to, I feel no sense of loyalty towards. I would fight for a zine army. I never fight for a contemporary art army. It is full of wankers, honestly. So you'll notice. So if you go to this thing which supposedly Bradford is about, which is segregation. That's the cliche about Bradford riots and segregated people from Kashmir who just live in their little bubble or whatever, right? But actually, London art was far more segregated. So you have Brick Lane, and you have the White Chapel Gallery, right? White. And then you have that pattern replicates itself everywhere. So you go to Brooklyn, you go to Queens. It's the same. You'll see a black and brown migrant community, and you'll see the hipsters who used to make the zines before I demolished their supremacy, and they live in the same space, but their brains obviously lodged in Berlin or Brighton or whatever, right? And they have no, you could be from another planet, right? So I've been making zines for 28 years and collecting zines for 28 years. I'm older than I look. So some of you are actually younger than that in this room, right? So I'm from the era of photocopies. Photocopiers being the heavenly godsend. My dad we lived on top of my dad's shop.
Right.
And we had a photocopier, and that saved my life. And then the 1990s, the last decade of human reality, before everyone becomes a TikTok account or whatever. So the NME used to be a very good newspaper. Music journalism used to be very good. You'd have in-depth articles with Kurt Cobain speaking about depression and that was the era in which I got into zines. So there were classified ads in the back of God, I'm sounding like an old man. Classified ads in the back of the NME, and that was how zine culture. Zine culture was all material. So back in the days of when everything was the internet. So I started making zines in before the internet was even a thing, and then I never predicted in my life that zine culture today is bigger now than at any point in human history, and I guess people get digital fatigue of staring at phones, and people want communities. But zine cultures generally create communities. So I don't believe contemporary art makes an area better. So you have Liverpool Biennale, but when I speak to anyone from Liverpool, they're like, "Here's a bunch of wankers from London, from Goldsmiths and Royal College, come to invade our city," and like nobody actually really connects with it. You know, the beautiful resistant city of Liverpool, which resisted Thatcher with socialism, which resisted state crime, the only city where the sun is banned, right? Doesn't, and then you have this Biennale.
Identity resonate.
And the same with Documenta in Venice. You have these wankers from London, New York, and Berlin come and invade the area, right? And it's not. They speak these words like nomadic, Deleuze, what archive. You know, these this specialist. Like I've got a master's in curating, so I know how to speak like a wanker, like professionally. And then so I view zine culture as not like now zines feature in art biennales. If you go to Art Asia Triennial in Manchester, they'll work with zine makers. This Documenta was curated by Ran Gupta, the collective from Indonesia, very punky, and it was better. So I think it's the best documentary of all time.
No, just because you were part of it too.
Yeah, like the chicken boxes. I make chicken boxes. The zines, like, it was more about hospitality, making friends, than like the elite power structure.
Yeah.
So like zines inform like my activism, but also in terms of like community building. So I'm not like a guy from a fringe Trotskyist group trying to recruit you in my party, right? I'm not using anyone. I'm not instrumentalizing anyone. So you're not a mass movement. But the problem with mass movements is that you're always someone's useful rather than you're not the soulful connection. So zines actually restore the sense of soul to people, and it's also like all these. So as I said, you go to Documenta, you go to the art world in East London, you go to the art world in New York, you go to art world in Berlin, and it's very clearly racially segregated. There's a white hipster class, and there's whereas like DIY culture is a way of like actually. Because the way in which these words like diversity, participation are done is through grants or bureaucracy or managerialism, right? And so zines aren't managerialism, they cut all the bureaucracy. And I even think, so I'm part of a trade union, Artist Union England, where they make zines as part of their practice. So a trade union which is also governed by laws, bureaucracy, managerialism, the whole having a zine reopens that back to conviviality, friendship, these types of values. So I think the art world actually, which the Documenta since the last 20 years claims to be the most post-colonial space, but living in these cities, it is more like the imagined perception of Bradford. There's the white art people, and there's a high street where every shop is a doner kebab shop, a hairdresser and a mobile phone shop repeated the entire street. And they live in parallel worlds. So DIY cultures was my way of. So I started making zines in the 90s, and then there was a bit of a revival in the last 10 years. And so I went to this zine thing called London Zine Symposium. It was just off Brick Lane, one of the most famous migrant roads in the whole world. And you'd have it would be 99.9% white hipster. I don't know why.
At the symposium.
Yeah, it was like this, but not as good, right? Run by white anarchists who are like, what's that joke about white anarchists? All their clothes are black, but all their friends are white, right? So they would run there, and then you would wonder this area which was 40% Muslim, Somali, black, brown, whatever.
Massive schism.
So I sat there, and then Sophia from OOMC is a wonderful organ donation week. Umk is a wonderful OOMK zine. They're a wonderful Muslim female creative collective. So Sophia from Duke just happened to be there too, and then every single person I met at that zine fair formed my guerrilla army to overthrow white hipster supremacy, which is my ambition in life. And so yeah, I make all my best friends at zine fairs, and the zine, like, through not being bureaucratic, through not being managerial, through not being dependent on big capital or big grants or the state, then reopened this space which was genuinely, it's diverse without having to call itself such. It's people living together without, like, our zine fair was run by like very pious Muslim women who'd have a prayer room, and then like it would still coexist with all other communities with no actual thing. So anyway, so my point being that zines actually make a city a better place, makes a community a better place, it makes people more mentally healthy without being a bureaucratic state structure. Like as much as I like NHS, like so like and
is there a particular experience you've ever had at a zine fair or a zine space which you thought, I would never have this experience in an art space? I would never have had it.
I think just the people being in the same room. That is it. You'd come from all the honest, like, good-hearted people from Bradford. You and Umar and Sumaya Asfar, another Bradford legend, used to come to that. So that video you saw was from 2017, which was the last ever DIY Cultures. I don't know ever, but that was, and then you were at that fair.
We came with Sumaya down.
Yeah. So I'm glad it even attracted the good-hearted people of Bradford. I think that's a compliment. And I so the worlding of the white hipster was like very narrow. So it was only a few cities. So what we tried to do with DIY Cultures, so there were people from like Uganda or Tanzania, so they would come, and by next year they would either be talking on the stage or forming their own collective. And I hope that's, so it's not only generous, it's generative, right?
Yeah, definitely. Even the Bradford Zine Fair, after its first or second year, it led to a zine and drawing club, which met organically in Bradford City Centre every month, I believe, and it ran itself. And then they produced a collective zine of Bradford coffee shops themselves that they'd drawn in their sessions. And then I believe you can buy that here now on the communal table by Mike Duckett. Like, he compiled, and that wasn't something we've necessarily very much facilitated. It organically transpired from the fair itself.
And it's not just race and class where these barriers are dissolved, but also age as well, because I guess a person who makes zines is still a child, still an old man, still middle-aged, and still a teenager all at the same time, right? Those dimensions of sensibility and feeling and connection you get in those times. But actually, so Mike Duckett actually made his first zine at 70 years old, ever. That's what he told me. So I was very touched and moved by that, because I was like, I'm too old to make zines. And then I was like, well, he started at 70, so that inspired me.
You're from Mike Barrett.
Oh, Mike Barrett.
Mike Barrett is a founding member of the revived Bradford Zine Fair. He produces the Magpie, which is also on the communal table, welcome table, and he does a series of zines. And he started off life like a graphic designer and lecturer, and discovered zines much later in life. And for him, it is very much this joyous, almost innocent space.
There was even a zine club in London with old Asian uncles and aunties, and then one old Asian uncle in London in the Stuart Hall Library made this zine called Traditional Family Values. Anyway, so so the archive of DIY Cultures is still online. So to me, like, when you talk about zine making, you're not just talking about cheap, small circulating publications. You're also talking about a sensibility and attitude and politics. So the notion of DIY, I guess, to some extent comes out of punk and anarchism. It's never the official
you've
thing.
explored some of that part of your work, because you made a short film about Hillsborough and the fanzine.
Yeah, so a previous DIY cultures, we showed a film about the zines of Liverpool. So if I ever have children, I'll bring them up in Liverpool, so they have good Scouse values. And no people from Liverpool, or Liverpool or Bradford, of course. Yeah. And so the Hillsborough disaster occurred in 1989, around the end of Thatcherism, and essentially 96 football fans from Liverpool at FA Cup final in Sheffield were crushed to death. And the police, media, government, state, and all the mainstream blamed the people of Liverpool and pathologised them and racialised them. I mean, 75% of Liverpool are Irish, so it's also got a colonial dimension. And one of the ways you only got justice for the Hillsborough campaign, so essentially the police were responsible for crushing them to death, the media were responsible for making up lies. There's a very famous headline by The Sun, which is banned through community action, which essentially blamed the victims. So it said like they urinated on the cops and all these grieving victims crying about their families. It basically demonised them as it does to Muslims and other groups. And football fans in the 80s that were part of a demonised group of, like the miners, LGBTQ people, the Irish. They were part of, before the Premier League, it was seen as a working class sport. So one of the ways in which that community survived was through fanzine culture. And what gets written out of fanzine history, which is usually centred around Riot Girl or punk, is the time which fanzines were actually the biggest was in the 80s, where football stadiums where people used to hand out fanzines. So you had 1 million fanzines in circulation, and you still have fanzines in circulation. If you go to Anfield, you'll see the man handing out Red Over the Land, which is one of the surviving fanzines. And the zines, firstly they had the truth before the mainstream. So all these media conglomerates just repeated the same lies, all these forms of mainstream repeated the lies. But the zines always had the truth, as was known by the community over years. And it also gave a forum for people who were grieving, suffering trauma. So it helped them survive, and it helped them have resilience. And it had a number of campaigns that went through. So in the 80s, football fans were so demonised that there were a war on civil liberties. So Thatcher tried to introduce ID cards just for football fans. And the way that campaign was reversed was through football fanzines. So they're a part of that resistance to the state and justice. And
did showcase the film here the last time you were here, I believe. The film.
If anyone wants to watch the film, just email me.
Yeah, Hamja is the filmmaker. He did kind of produce and work with people to.
That was actually screened and debuted at the last DIY Cultures too.
Yeah.
The trailer's online, but if anyone wants to watch the film,
if you want screening of it anywhere, you can get in contact with Hamja because you still told that, because it's not something you can watch online or pay to watch.
I actually screened it at Zine Fairs.
Screen it at
so
Zine
the last
Fair.
Zine Fair was at
Do you do York?
Yeah, it was at York Zine Fair. And it was
Is Jade from York?
Yeah, thank you so much. I didn't get round to
saying we know each other already, and we just met today, so that's like power of zine. So my entire zine collection, which is thousands of, is at Hamja Zine Collection and also at DIY Zine Bag. So you have zine libraries. Is there a Bradford Zine library?
There is a few two libraries of sorts. It meant to be one starting here, but Dion, who I would have launched that with, is currently off sick with COVID. So watch this space. When we get it launched, the zine library here will have beginnings of a zine library. There's also the 1 in 12 Anarchist Club in Bradford, which is historically renowned, started in the, help me out, the 70s, 821. So that's a members only anarchist club, and as part of that building in there is a library, a 1 in 12 anarchist library, which has quite a sizable zine collection as part of the library. And it was recently categorised and organised too, so it's very accessible, and we were hoping to take people there today. However, the 1 in 12 is closed today and tomorrow and the day after, unfortunately.
There's also, if you're from other cities, Manchester has a very famous Salford Zine Library.
Yeah, there's also the Glasgow
Glasgow
Zine
Zine
Library,
I
which
think full print is unofficially.
and they're quite new comparatively as well compared to 1 in 12, which is much older. But with 1 in 12, if you want to ever go, you can become a member of the 1 in 12 club, and you do that by, how do you do that, Estelle?
You can come and visit the club, or you can visit the website. There's now an online membership form, and it's a tariff for people on different levels as well.
Cool. So anyway, my zine library is better than all the zine libraries. So my zine library is nomadic. So at DOI Zine Bank, you'll see it. So my philosophy, my zine library is like a caravan.
Yeah.
So if you want me to bring my zine library to your space, I can do that. And so I travel with my zine library around the world. So I've taken it to Brown University in the US, I've taken it to Slovenia, taken it to Italy, I could bring it to Bradford.
Moving on, just wanted to finish, don't you want to talk about a bit more about Documenta and your experience there? Or
Oh, I had a horrible experience with Documenta, but and a brilliant one.
definitely caused a ruckus. Do tell a little bit about what your exhibition, because you were part of Documenta 15, so you exhibited there, and you were.
I still prefer, like, even though I've been in now the peak of contemporary art, but it's still not as good as like Bradford Zine Fair. Like, so Documenta is like it has 1 million visitors. It has a budget of 42 million, but it's just very German.
Yeah.
So anyway, so at Documenta, I still get like 100 death threats from Germany every day and racism. So I have this hashtag hands off Documenta, which you can hold and you can show love and solidarity to me, which is also DIY culture. So Germany is just so basically, if you're pro-Palestinian in Germany, they will ruin your life. And I think, even though this has got nothing to do with the talk, but let's do it. It's like there's a lot of bad things that happen in Germany that nobody knows about. So if something bad happens in America, everyone knows about it. Everyone knows about George Floyd. Because no one knows about the NSU neo-Nazi murders, where some guy just walks into a Turkish kebab shop and shoots everyone, which happened in the city where Kassel. And like, so Padiga, which is the big Islamophobic mass movement in Germany, they tried to export it here, but because Britain's a nice civilized place, we actually quashed it within a couple of things. But then in terms of the anti-Palestine movement, so BDS, which is the peaceful civil movement, there's also a lot of zines about Palestine that I could talk about too. Is basically